I discovered months of intimate messages between my wife and another woman and realized I'd been fighting alone for a marriage that was already completely over. Hey, this is John. 14 years. You know how people say marriage is work? They're not kidding. But somewhere along the way, Emma and I stopped clocking in together. I'm not even sure when it happened exactly. Maybe around year 10, when my promotion meant more travel, or maybe it started earlier when Ethan was born and we both just got lost in the chaos of new parenthood. Either way, we've been running on fumes for a while. I was in the kitchen making Ethan's lunch when it hit me. Really hit me. The kid was upstairs getting dressed for school, and Emma was already gone for her morning jog, which had become less about fitness and more about avoiding me, if I'm being honest. I'm spreading peanut butter on bread, and I realized we hadn't had a real conversation in weeks. Not about bills or Ethan's soccer schedule, or whose turn it was to pick up groceries. A real conversation. About us, about anything that mattered. That's when I knew we needed help. Professional help. Look, I'm not the type to air dirty laundry. My dad would have laughed at the idea of paying someone to listen to your problems. But Ethan was 9, and kids aren't stupid. He'd started asking why mommy and daddy didn't watch movies together anymore. Why we ate dinner in shifts. Why the house felt so quiet even when we were all home. I brought it up that night after Ethan went to bed. Emma was on the couch with her laptop, working on some freelance article about sustainable living or whatever. I sat down next to her. Not too close because that always made her tense up these days. I told her we needed to talk to someone. A counselor. She didn't even look up from her screen at first, just made this little snorting sound. When she finally did look at me, she had that expression she perfected over the years, the one that made me feel like I was being dramatic. She said therapy was for people who couldn't handle their own problems. So we just needed to communicate better, that we could figure it out ourselves. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I am, spending 12 hours a day helping people work through their medical problems, and I can't even diagnose what's wrong in my own house. I pressed harder, told her this wasn't just about us anymore. Ethan needed stability, needed to see his parents working through problems instead of just existing around each other. I've been pulling extra shifts at the hospital for the past 2 years, building up our savings, and I was finally in a position to cut back to regular hours. But we had to meet halfway. Emma got defensive fast, started listing all the ways I'd checked out of the marriage, the double shifts, the nights I'd come home too exhausted to do anything but collapse on the couch, the times I'd missed Ethan's games because I was covering for colleagues in the ER. And she wasn't wrong about any of it. I owned that. But I also told her that's exactly why we needed professional help. We were both carrying too much resentment to sort through it alone. She went quiet for a long time, and I thought maybe I'd gotten through to her. Then she said something about not wanting to pay a stranger to judge our lives, to make us feel like failures. I tried explaining that therapists don't judge. They help you see patterns, give you tools to break cycles. But Emma had already made up her mind. The conversation went in circles for over an hour. Every time I brought up Ethan's well-being, she'd pivot to how I was never around anyway. So what did I know about what he needed? When I mentioned specific incidents, like the night Ethan asked why we never laughed anymore, she dismissed them as normal kid concerns. But I could see something else in her eyes. Fear, maybe, like the idea of sitting in a room and actually talking through our problems scared her more than just letting them fester. Emma had always been better at writing her feelings than speaking them, and therapy would require showing up emotionally in ways she'd been avoiding for years. I made a decision that night. I told her I was going to find someone for us to talk to, with or without her initial enthusiasm, that this wasn't negotiable anymore. Ethan deserved parents who were at least try to work things out, not just going through the motions until he graduated high school. Emma didn't say much after that, just closed her laptop and went upstairs. I sat there in the dark for another hour, thinking about how we'd gotten to this point, thinking about the woman I'd married, the one who used to laugh at my terrible jokes, who'd stay up all night talking about books and dreams and ridiculous hypothetical scenarios. That woman was still there somewhere. Had to be. And maybe if we could just get some neutral ground, some professional guidance, we could find our way back to each other. For Ethan's sake, if not our own. Because here's what I knew for certain. I wasn't giving up on 14 years and a son without exhausting every option first. Emma could roll her eyes at therapy all she wanted, but I was going to schedule that first appointment. We were going to show up, and we were going to fight for this family, even if it meant fighting through our own stubbornness and pride first. Some things are worth the discipline and persistence. Our son's sense of security was definitely one of them.
Hey there, Emma here. God, where do I even start with this mess? You know that feeling when you're drowning, but everyone thinks you're just floating? That's been my life for the past 3 years. John keeps pushing this therapy thing like it's some magic cure-all, but he doesn't get it. Sitting in some sterile office dissecting our failures would destroy what little dignity I have left. I used to be somebody, you know. Back when we first got married, I had this freelance writing career that was actually going somewhere. Remember that piece I did for Atlantic Monthly about modern motherhood? The one that got shared everywhere and had editors calling me for weeks. I was on fire then. Had this confidence, this voice that people wanted to hear. Publishers were interested in my book proposal. Then Ethan came along and everything shifted, which is normal, right? But what they don't tell you is how you can love your kid more than breathing while simultaneously mourning the person you used to be. John just kept climbing his career ladder, more responsibility at the hospital, department head, all these accolades. Meanwhile, I'm writing listicles about eco-friendly cleaning products. The worst part, I used to write better than this. I used to have ideas that mattered. Now I stare at blank screens for hours, recycling the same tired angles because my brain feels wrapped in cotton. And John, he comes home after saving actual lives and asks how my little articles are going. Little articles. Like I'm playing pretend while he does the real work. He blames his absence for everything, but honestly, his absence isn't the problem. It's that when he is here, he's still Dr. Evans, not just John. He fixes everything with logic and efficiency, like our marriage is a patient he can diagnose and treat. When I try to explain how isolated I feel, he starts problem-solving immediately. More childcare so I can write. A home office renovation. A new laptop. As if the right tools could resurrect my dead creativity. But here's what really gets me about this therapy obsession. He wants me to be vulnerable with a stranger when he's never been vulnerable with me. Not really. He compartmentalizes everything. Work stress goes in one box, marriage issues in another. Meanwhile, I'm supposed to spill my guts to some therapist who's probably judging every word. Thank God for Sarah. She's the only person who actually understands what I'm going through. We met in this online writing group 2 years ago, and she just gets it. She's been through her own marriage struggles, knows what it's like to feel invisible in your own life. When I tell her about John's latest helpful suggestions, or how he scheduled that first therapy appointment without asking when I'm available, she doesn't try to fix me. She just listens. Sarah reminds me that I'm not crazy for feeling resentful. That it's normal to mourn the career I sacrificed while John soared. She validates things I've been afraid to say out loud, like how I sometimes feel more like John's employee than his partner. How I handle everything domestic while he gets to be the hero saving lives, then acts surprised when I'm not grateful. Our conversations happen late at night usually, after everyone's asleep. Sometimes we text for hours, sometimes we video chat. She's become my lifeline. The one person who sees me as Emma the person, not Emma the wife or mother or failed writer. With her, I remember who I used to be before I got swallowed up by everyone else's needs. And look, I know I'm still a good mother. That's not the issue here. Ethan is happy, healthy, thriving in school. I show up for him in ways that matter. I'm the one who remembers which friends he's fighting with, who knows he hates mushroom texture but loves mushroom flavor. John might provide stability and financial security, but I provide the emotional foundation that actually shapes who Ethan becomes. When John suggests therapy, what I hear is that I'm broken. That my feelings about our marriage are symptoms to be treated rather than legitimate responses to years of being dismissed. Sarah helps me see that demanding therapy is just another way John tries to control the narrative. He wants a professional to validate his version, that he's the reasonable one trying to save the marriage while I'm the difficult wife who won't cooperate. But cooperation requires partnership, and partnership requires seeing each other as equals. I'm tired of being the problem that needs fixing instead of the person whose perspective might actually matter. I'm tired of pretending his career taking priority was some mutual decision instead of something that just happened while I was drowning in diapers and deadlines. Sarah says maybe the real issue isn't that John and I have grown apart. Maybe it's that I've grown beyond needing his approval to validate my feelings. Maybe I've finally found my voice again, even if he doesn't want to hear it. So no, I don't want to sit in therapy and watch John charm another professional while I struggle to articulate years of resentment.
3 months into therapy, and we were getting nowhere fast. Emma showed up, sure, but she might as well have been a mannequin in that chair. Dr. Cruz would ask questions, and I'd give honest answers about my work schedule, about missing family time, about wanting to rebuild what we'd lost. Then Emma would sit there like she was being interrogated, offering these vague responses about feeling unheard or misunderstood. I started dreading those Tuesday evening sessions. Not because of Dr. Cruz. She was good at her job, kept things balanced, never took sides. But watching Emma check out mentally while I was actually trying to engage, that was brutal. She'd nod at the right moments, agree that communication was important, promise to work on being more open. Then we'd get in the car afterward, and she'd immediately pull out her phone. Always texting someone. Sarah, I found out later. At first, I didn't think much of it. Emma had friends from her writing groups, online communities, whatever. Made sense she'd have people to vent to. Hell, I talked to my buddy Mike about marriage stuff sometimes. But this felt different. She'd be more animated after those late-night phone calls than she ever was during our therapy sessions. More energized, like she'd just had some revelation that didn't include me. The real wake-up call came during session 6. Dr. Cruz asked Emma what she hoped to gain from our work together, and Emma basically said she wasn't sure therapy could fix fundamental incompatibilities. Just like that. Fundamental incompatibilities. Like we were discussing blood types instead of 14 years of marriage. I lost it. Not yelling or anything dramatic, but I called her out right there. Told her she wasn't even trying, that she'd already decided this wouldn't work before we started. Emma got defensive, said I was proving her point about not listening to her concerns. But what concerns? She never voiced them in therapy. She saved all her real thoughts for Sarah. That's when I realized what was happening. Emma wasn't trying to fix our marriage. She was building a case against it. Every therapy session where she stayed surface level, every homework assignment from Dr. Cruz that she half-assed, every time she deflected instead of engaging. She was collecting evidence that we were beyond repair. Meanwhile, Sarah was getting the full version of Emma. The raw emotions, the detailed complaints, the intimate thoughts about our relationship. Everything that should have been happening in Dr. Cruz's office was happening in late-night conversations with someone who had no investment in saving our marriage. I confronted Emma about it after session 8. Asked her straight up if she was more committed to her friendship with Sarah than to working on us. She acted like I was being paranoid, said I was threatened by her having support outside our marriage. But that wasn't it. I wasn't threatened by her having friends. I was pissed that she was more vulnerable with a stranger than with her husband or a therapist. The breaking point came 3 weeks later. I was looking for Ethan's permission slip for a field trip, checking Emma's desk where she usually kept school stuff. Her laptop was open, and there it was, an entire email thread with Sarah going back months. Page after page of complaints about me, about our marriage, about how therapy was pointless because I'd never really changed. Emma had shared details about our sex life, about arguments we'd had, about conversations from therapy sessions. She told Sarah things she'd never told Dr. Cruz. Worse, Sarah was encouraging Emma to give up, telling her she deserved better, that some marriages just run their course. There was one email that gutted me completely. Emma wrote that she felt more understood after one conversation with Sarah than after months of trying to connect with me. That Sarah saw her potential, while I only saw her problems. That maybe the real issue wasn't our marriage problems, but that we'd simply grown into incompatible people. That night, I sat in my car and bar for 2 hours after my shift, just thinking. About Ethan asking why we never watched movies together anymore. About Emma's face during therapy, polite but distant, like she was humoring a difficult patient. about how she lit up when her phone buzzed with Sarah's messages. I wasn't fighting for a marriage anymore. I was fighting for custody of my son with a woman who'd already emotionally divorced me months ago. Emma had chosen Sarah as her confidant, her emotional support, her primary relationship. I was just the guy who paid the bills and showed up to therapy sessions she'd already decided were pointless. The next morning, I called Dr. Cruz and told her we wouldn't be coming back. Then I called my lawyer.
John filed for divorce like he was filling out a prescription. Clinical, efficient, no room for discussion. Just handed me papers one Tuesday morning while Ethan was getting ready for school, said he'd already talked to a lawyer. 14 years, and he ends it with paperwork and logistics. I shouldn't have been surprised, but I was. Devastated, actually. You know that moment when you realize you've been playing chicken with someone who was never going to swerve? That's what this felt like. All those months of half-hearted therapy, of keeping Sarah as my emotional lifeline instead of really engaging with fixing us. I thought I was protecting myself. Turns out I was just building my own prison. Sarah kept telling me I'd be better off without him. That John was controlling, emotionally unavailable, that I deserved someone who appreciated my intelligence and creativity. She painted this picture of my post-divorce life, rediscovering my writing voice, dating men who actually listened, maybe moving somewhere with a real literary scene. She made it sound like freedom instead of failure. So when the papers came, I leaned into that narrative, told everyone John had given up on us, that he'd chosen his career over his family one too many times. Which wasn't entirely wrong, right? He had missed dinners and games and conversations. He had treated our marriage like a problem to be solved rather than a relationship to be nurtured. I wasn't making that up. Sarah validated every complaint, every justification. She reminded me how John had dismissed my writing, how he'd prioritized his medical career while mine withered, how he'd pushed therapy on me like I was broken instead of simply unheard. She made it easy to stay angry instead of looking deeper at what was really happening between us. The first few months after he moved out were almost euphoric. I had the house to myself most nights. Ethan split time between us initially. I could write without interruption, talk to Sarah for hours, even started going out again. There was this group of divorced women I met through Sarah's recommendation, and we'd hit the bars downtown, talking about toxic masculinity and reclaiming our power. It felt revolutionary at first, like I was finally living authentically instead of playing house with someone who didn't understand me. Sarah would send me articles about women who'd flourished after divorce, stories of creative renaissance following the end of suffocating marriages. I started thinking maybe John leaving was the push I needed to become who I was supposed to be. Except the writing didn't come back. Not really. I'd sit at my laptop with all this newfound freedom and still produce the same mediocre content I'd been churning out for years. Turns out my creative block wasn't caused by John's presence. It was caused by me, by choices I'd made, by roads I hadn't taken. But it was easier to blame him than face that truth. The partying escalated faster than I expected. What started as girls' nights became regular bar crawling. Sarah introduced me to her crowd, divorced women, aspiring artists, people who stayed up too late and lived a little too hard. Someone always had pills to keep the energy up, wine to take the edge off, contacts for whatever you needed to feel better about your life falling apart. I told myself I was exploring, experiencing life the way I'd never been able to when I was tied down. But really, I was running from the growing realization that I destroyed something I actually valued for the illusion of understanding from people who barely knew me. The custody hearing destroyed me. John's lawyer painted a picture of instability, the drinking, the pills, the nights I'd forgotten to pick up Ethan from soccer because I was too wasted to drive. They had photos of me stumbling out of bars at 2 a.m., text messages where I'd ranted to Sarah about how much I resented having to be on for Ethan when I was struggling just to function. Sarah sat in the back of that courtroom, nodding supportively, but when the judge awarded John primary custody, she didn't stick around for the aftermath. Just disappeared. No follow-up calls, no check-ins, no validation when I actually needed it most. Turns out having a confidant who feeds your resentment isn't the same as having someone who cares about your well-being. That's when it hit me. sitting alone in my car outside the courthouse. All those therapy sessions where I'd stonewalled, where I'd sat there like a statue saying just enough to seem cooperative while saving my real thoughts for Sarah. That wasn't Dr. Cruz's fault, or even John's. That was me choosing easy validation over hard work. Me blaming John for my lost creativity when really I'd been too scared to face that maybe I just wasn't as talented as I thought. Maybe my writer's block had nothing to do with his career success and everything to do with me being afraid of failing on my own terms. I see Ethan every other weekend now. He's polite but distant, like he's protecting himself from getting too attached to this version of me. Sometimes I catch him watching me with a sad expression, like he's mourning the mother I used to be. The truth I couldn't face during all those months of therapy, all those late-night conversations with Sarah, finally crashed down on me. John didn't steal my creative spark. I gave it away by choosing resentment over responsibility, blame over growth. I sabotaged our marriage not because he was impossible to reach, but because Sarah made it easier to stay angry than to do the actual work of reconnecting. John didn't abandon me. I abandoned us, piece by piece, validation by validation, until there was nothing left worth fighting for.